Hey guys, tonight we step into a land of cherry blossoms, solemn tea ceremonies, and enough silent staring contests to fill 100 war scrolls. But don't be fooled by the poetry or pretty silk because you're about to start life as a samurai. And let's just say, your childhood's going to involve a bit more bruising than building sandcastles. You're born into a family of warriors, lucky you. That means your cradle isn't far from your first wooden sword. While other kids learn to read haiku, you're taught how to swing a bakken with enough force to knock someone's teeth into a different prefecture. Your toys, miniature spears. Your lullabies, drunken war chants, sung by grizzled uncles who haven't trimmed their beards since the last shogun died. By age 7, your daily routine includes learning to ride horseback without holding the reins, and reciting maxims about loyalty while balancing on a slippery bamboo log. You're not just a child, you're a little sponge, soaking up centuries of strict discipline and subtle intimidation. At this age, one of your trainers might be a retired killer who once sliced a bandit's neck in a single stroke. He now yells at you about elbow placement and calls you disgraceful riceworm. You train hard, eat fast, and sleep stiff. Wooden swords thwack against your ribs until bruises bloom like plum blossoms. There's no coddling. No, you tried your best. You mess up. You do it again. You cry. You do it twice. The samurai path doesn't wait for your tears, sharpens itself against them, of course. Training isn't all slashes and sweat. You're also taught poetry, calligraphy, and how to conduct yourself like a tiny nobleman. Because a samurai who can't write a death poem in elegant brushstrokes is basically just a bandit with delusions of grandeur. Your handwriting, judged. Your bow, judged. Even how you pour tea gets critiqued. Every gesture must ooze grace, and gravity. Your entire existence is a performance. And you better not break character. Historians still argue whether the early samurai upbringing was more about martial discipline or aristocratic polish. What's certain is that by the time you're 12, you've probably seen more simulated deaths than a modern gamer and written more stilted poems than a Shakespeare impersonator with a caffeine addiction. By adolescence, you're sparring with steel blades. Not full speed, not yet, but enough to make your palms sweat and your opponents bleed, just a little. One small mistake, and you'll feel that terrifying zing of metal biting into your training armor. The older boys don't go easy on you. They want to see if you'll flinch, hesitate, or, heaven forbid, drop your weapon. You do. You're humiliated for weeks. One boy who did just that ended up cleaning stable stalls while reciting Bushido texts backwards. For months. Meanwhile, your instructors press philosophy on you like spicy wasabi. You memorize lines like the way of the warrior is death, even though you haven't even had your first sake. They want that idea soaked so deeply into your bones that when real combat comes, you don't run, you lean in. You're taught to accept death with calm detachment, like it's just another item on your to-do list. Wake up. Practice sword. Accept mortality. Repeat. And it's not all hypothetical. Sometimes, you visit actual battlefield sites. You stare at blood-soaked earth and broken helmets, imagining your future among the fallen. Sometimes a general visits to give a speech, and by speech, we mean a 5-minute monologue about honor, mud, and intestines, delivered with the charisma of a haunted statue. Fun fact, in some regions, kids were made to catch live insects with chopsticks to develop precision and patience. Samurai training, part soldier school, part Mr. Miyagi fever dream. There's also the horse training. You're expected to ride like wind over water, firing arrows at straw dummies that bounce with every gallop. You fall, get up. You miss, try again. You cry because your thigh muscles feel like boiled noodles. No one cares. Even the horses look at you like, toughen up, kid. Meals are simple. Rice, pickled vegetables, maybe some dried fish. But always served with formality. Left hand holds the bowl. Right hand raises the chopsticks. No slouching, no burping, no slurping like a farmer. Even eating is a performance of controlled pride. Honestly, you're half-starved and would kill for a dumpling. But dignity, as they say, is more important than digestion. By the time your voice cracks and your shoulders broaden, you've already spent more time bowing than breathing. You walk with stiff purpose, like you're always on the verge of drawing a blade even when it's just to use the bathroom. You're not allowed to laugh loudly, slouch casually, or speak out of turn. Every action is a dance. And the music is centuries of tradition echoing in your bones. You dream of glory of one day standing tall in the ranks of armored legends. But you also carry a quiet dread. What if you fail? What if you dishonor your clan? What if you never become more than a boy with a blade and too many bruises? You'll never say these things aloud, of course. But they settle in your gut like unchewed rice. And still, each morning, you rise with the sun, bow to your elders, and prepare to swing that sword again, because you're a samurai in training now. And there's no way out. By now, you've learned to hold a sword like it's part of your body. You've memorized death poems before your first kiss, and you've bowed so often your spine curves with precision. But all of that, every bruise and brushstroke, is just scaffolding around the real pillar of your life, Bushido. The way of the warrior Bushido isn't written in blood, it's carved into your soul. It starts with your righteousness. You don't fight because you're angry. You fight because it's just, because your lord demands it, or because someone's honor, possibly even yours, needs defending. And let's be honest, you don't always agree with these calls, but the code doesn't care about your feelings. It's less follow your heart and more cut your heart out if it betrays your duty. Then there's you, courage, but not the loud, charging into battle kind. It's the quiet courage to kneel before your enemy when ordered, to accept humiliation when necessary, and to draw your own blade across your belly if you disgrace yourself. Courage is baked into every bow, every pause, every moment of stillness before violence explodes. You live with these virtues like roommates uninvited, but always watching. Rei respect, Makoto, honesty, Maiho, honor, and Chigi, loyalty, each one a thread in the tightly woven net of Bushido that keeps you upright, and occasionally strangled. Forget one, even once, and your name might vanish from the scrolls forever, your story reduced to a warning whispered in sake shops. The tricky part, Bushido, isn't a fixed rulebook. Historians still argue whether it was a structured doctrine or more of a retroactive myth shaped during the peaceful Tokugawa era to keep bored samurai from stabbing each other over spilled ink. Some say it was like an ancient PR campaign. Please don't duel in the rice fields, remember, Bushido. But for you, here and now, it's real. You feel it with every decision. Do you speak up when your superior lies? Do you defend your friend when he's caught gambling? Do you protect the weak even when no one's watching? Every choice is a test, and failure comes with penalties. No report card ever threatened. It seeps into your dreams. You wake up sweating because, in your dream, you bowed to lower, not low enough. You once dreamt that you dropped your katana, and the shame lingered like smoke in your chest all morning. Even minor infractions get you scolded. You laughed during meditation. That's a breach of dignity. You touched your sword with your left hand instead of your right. Disrespectful. One time, someone was exiled for smiling too smugly after a duel. Your face must remain composed at all times. Samurai don't smirk, they nod. Gravely. And speaking of gravitas, don't even think about being late. Punctuality is practically a religious experience. If you arrive early, you're on time. If you arrive on time, you're disgracefully late. If you're actually late, well, better bring your short sword and a clean white robe. The weight of Bushido presses hardest during conflict. In battle, you can't just stab someone in the back and cheer. You must fight with fairness, call out your name before you strike, and if possible recite a poem afterward. Imagine pausing mid-duel to say, "Though cherry blossoms fall, the blade remembers." You may be bleeding out, but at least you're eloquent, and yet, there's a strange beauty in it all. Bushido doesn't just shape warriors, it sculpts identities. You're not a hired killer, you're a vessel of purpose. Even when you're polishing your armor or delivering a message, there's an air of ceremony to it. You do everything with precision, like the world is watching. Even if it's just the birds, there are days you question it, of course. Like when you see an older samurai punished for defending a peasant without permission, or when a noble bribes his way out of shame, while his loyal vassal suffers seppuku for a minor misstep. Bushido is supposed to be a great equalizer. But sometimes it feels like a tightrope over boiling water, beautiful from afar, deadly if you slip. Still, you hold to it. Because if you don't, what's left? A wandering sword, no master, no meaning, and you've seen what that looks like. Men who abandon the code walk like ghosts, empty, unanchored. One spent every morning apologizing to a tree because he believed it was the soul of the Lord. He failed. Another became a traveling musician, singing sad ballads about fallen warriors in exchange for dried fish, and pity Bushido teaches you that honor isn't what you say. It's what you do when no one's clapping. And so you bow when you're told, even if your knees ache. You silence your tongue when your pride itches to shout. You sheath your sword when your heart whispers vengeance. Some days, the weight of the code feels heavier than your armor. But it also keeps you upright. When fear gnaws at your courage, it gives shape to your decisions, rhythm to your days. And when your time comes, meaning to your death, so you keep your posture straight, your blade clean, and your spirit silent. You are a samurai, and Bushido is the breath you take before every choice you make. So now, you've got the Bushido spirit pulsing through your veins. Your childhood scars are neatly hidden beneath your formal kimono, and you're bowing like a well-oiled gate hinge. But before you even swing that katana in a real duel, you've got 2 armor up, and, let me tell you, getting dressed for death is not a casual affair. First, there's the kusazuri, those skirt-like plates hanging from your waist. They look like decorative window blinds, but try sprinting in them, and you'll feel like you strapped on a xylophone. They're tied with cords made of silk or leather, soft, yes, but strong enough to hold a small horse. And every knot has to be placed just so. You don't want anything flapping at the wrong moment when you're trying to not get gutted. Over that comes the D, your chest armor, lacquered iron or leather, layered like scales, and polished until it blinds your enemies, the sun. It clinks and creaks as you move, like an old drawer being opened. Underneath, you're wearing a kasode, basically a thick undershirt, to keep the metal from rubbing your ribs raw. Spoiler, it still rubs your ribs raw. Then there's the sode. Giant rectangular shoulder guards that make you look like a warrior cabinet hybrid. They shift with each movement, clashing like cymbals during every sword stroke. Your forearms, wrapped in coat, which are armored sleeves padded to soften the impact of incoming arrows, or at least slow them down enough that they don't completely skewer you. Your legs are wrapped with hydate and sunia thigh and shin guards. Now you're officially a clunky jigsaw puzzle of lacquered metal and sweat. Walking is stiff. Running is agony. Sitting, forget about it. But the whole thing's meant to balance protection with mobility, which is impressive considering you feel like a heavily decorated beetle on stilts. And then, the crowning glory, the kabuto helmet, with its flared neck guard and horn-like crest. It's part battle gear, part medieval fashion statement. Some helmets are adorned with mustaches, antlers, even grotesque masks called menpo that make you look like a demon from someone's worst fever dream. The goal, intimidation. You're not just fighting, you're performing a psychological opera, and your costumes got to sell the part. Historians still argue whether samurai armor was truly practical for large-scale warfare or more ceremonial in many cases. Some say all that intricate lacing and lacquer would be a nightmare in the rain, while others point out that the flexible lamellar design was surprisingly agile. Either way, it squeaks when you move, and don't even ask what happens if you fall in a stream now, while you're sweating through your underlayers, trying not to tip over from the weight. There's a quiet pride that swells in your chest. This armor isn't just protection, it's legacy. It's the same kind your ancestors wore storming castle walls, slicing through enemy lines like steely hurricanes. Some pieces are heirlooms, passed down and patched up. You can still smell the camphor and bloodstains of battles past if you lean in too close. But armor isn't only for war. You're expected to show up in full gear for parades, for ceremonies, even for certain high-stakes meetings. Imagine discussing rice taxation policy while dressed like a walking tank. That's Tuesday in your world. And here's a quirky little detail: samurai sometimes had family crests, or mon, painted on their armor, basically early brand logos. Yours might be a fan, a leaf, a crane, or something fiercer, like crossed swords. They help identify you in battle, but also ensure that if you do something embarrassing, everyone knows exactly whose family to shame. The armor, like everything else in your life, must be meticulously maintained. Rust, unacceptable fraying cords, an insult to your clan. There's a whole ritual just for cleaning it. You lay the pieces out, oil the metal, retie loose knots. It's part meditation, part muscle memory, and yes, part intense paranoia. And while you might think armor is about fighting, it's also about status. The more ornate your gear, the higher your rank. A flashy helmet crest, probably a general. Plain black lacquer with minimal flair. Still deadly, but not writing the laws of the land. Your armor whispers to the world who you are, before you even draw your blade. Of course, there's a trade-off. You can't just throw this stuff on, and go. It takes a solid half hour, and usually an assistant or two, to suit up properly. If someone breaks into your house, you'd better hope they're polite enough to wait while you get your greaves strapped on. You've worn this armor during sparring tournaments, riding drills, and the infamous mud pit challenge, which is exactly what it sounds like. You once slipped face first, and took 20 minutes to stand up again. The laughter still echoes in your nightmares, but slowly, it becomes a second skin. The weight no longer drags you, it centers you. The creaks become familiar. The layers become comforting. You know exactly where your enemy's sword might land. You trust your armor to hold, mostly when you march into battle. The armor sings a dull metallic rhythm with every step. Your squad moves in unison, a lacquered wave of deadly intent. And through the slits of your menpo mask, your breath fogs the metal. You can't see your face, but you don't need to. You are a samurai now, steel on the outside, ceremony within, and somewhere beneath it all, your heart still beats slow and steady against the weight of centuries. Your armor's on, your bow is strung, and most importantly, your blade is at your hip. Your katana, the elegant, terrifying curve of sharpened legend. It's not just your weapon, it's your soul. Literally, the saying goes, the sword is the soul of the samurai, no pressure. The katana is more than a piece of forged steel. It's the result of ritual, artistry, and very real sweat equity from swordsmiths who treat the forging process like a spiritual act. The best blades are folded steel dozens of times, creating a core of strength and flexibility. If you're lucky, your family passed down a katana with a name, a story, and a few notches from that one campaign when Grandpa nearly lost his leg, but didn't. And you don't just grab your katana willy-nilly. It's placed, often reverently, beside your bedding. You don't eat with it nearby, unless it's positioned correctly. You never touch the blade with bare fingers. It's an insult, and also terrible for the polish. And heaven forbid you draw it inside without cause. There's an old saying, if a samurai draws his blade, it must taste blood either from an enemy or himself. So you keep that thing sheathed, unless you mean it. That said, you're expected to be able to draw and cut in one fluid motion. This is called iijutsu, and it's an entire discipline on its own. You've spent months practicing the move grip, the hilt. Slide the scabbard back, and unleash a clean horizontal slash before your opponent even finishes blinking. It's not about speed, it's about timing. A breath too late, and you're the one hitting the ground. A breath too early, and you might insult someone important by accidentally slicing off a sleeve. Historians still argue whether the katana's reputation as the perfect sword is historically justified, or mostly post-feudal hype. Some claim it was more ceremony than practicality, especially compared to the longer tachi, or the brutal practicality of spears. But there's no denying the katana's mythical weight psychologically and spiritually. To wield one is to step into a lineage of responsibility. When you're young, you think the katana is for showing off, drawing fast, posing dramatically, or slicing through bamboo like it's butter. But then you see what it actually does to a person's body, and the fantasy evaporates like steam off a hot blade. It's not clean, it's not elegant. The katana is a razor-edged truth you can't look away from. You spend hours caring for it, polishing it with powdered stone, oiling it with clove-scented oil, wrapping the hilt in silk. Your instructor once made you rewrap the handle because your thumbprint was slightly crooked. If your grip fails, so do you. he said. You haven't forgotten. You've also had nightmares about your grip failing, and your blade flying off like a deadly boomerang. When you wear it, the curve of the katana rests against your hip, blade up. That way, your draw pulls it naturally into action. The scabbard's IA is just as important. It's usually made of lacquered wood, sometimes with subtle designs or symbolic inlays. One of your friends carved a hidden message into the inside of his saya. No one's sure what it says, but he smirks every time he draws it. You're also trained in using the wakizashi, the shorter companion blade worn alongside the katana. Together, they're known as the daishu, meaning big. The wakizashi isn't just a backup, it's your close quarters companion. Your tool for dark rooms, narrow alleys, and yes, the blade you might use for seppuku if the need arises. You try not to dwell on that part too much, but the blade is always there, patient, silent. When traveling, you remove your sword upon entering a home, placing it to your right within reach, but out of offense. In court, your sword must be surrendered at the door. It's a strange feeling, walking around unarmed. Naked, almost. The weight on your hip is more than metal. It's identity. One quirky tradition. Samurai often tested their blades on criminals' corpses to judge sharpness. Their katana with inscriptions on the tang under, the hilt recording how many bodies they cut through in a single stroke. A bit morbid, yes. Efficient, arguably. You've never seen this done yourself, but you've heard stories from older samurai who recall the smell, the sound, the chilling silence that followed. And then there's the duel. Not in battle, but the formal, ritualized challenge. Perhaps it's a matter of honor, a dispute over land, a perceived insult over poetry at a tea ceremony. Doesn't matter. You both arrive in full dress, bow deeply, and stand across from each other in total silence. Sometimes for minutes, sometimes hours. One twitch, and steel flashes. Your master once told you, a true samurai wins the duel before blades touch. It's a mind game. Posture, breath, intention. And when the blades finally move, it's over in a blink. One cut, one scream, one crimson thread unraveling across the gravel. You remember the first time you saw a duel. You were maybe 13. The loser stood for a second too long, then collapsed like a puppet whose strings had snapped. You didn't sleep for 2 nights, but you trained harder the next morning. Now your katana is part of your gait, your posture, your dreams. You still whispered to it before battle, not because you're superstitious, but because it's the only thing that really understands you. You wear it not to show off, not to frighten, but because it reminds everyone, including yourself, who you are. A warrior, a protector, a samurai. The katana at your hip whispers a quiet promise. Your armor creaks with each poised step, and your life revolves around honor. But you learn soon enough that the world doesn't always follow the same code. Because while samurai ideals are polished, like your sword, reality is a little bloodier, a little messier, and a lot more complicated. Welcome to the world of deadly duels and friendly betrayals. You thought enemies would arrive on horseback, banners waving, shouting their names before charging. That happens, sometimes. But more often, your enemies sit across from you at a feast. They pour you sake. They compliment your poetry. And then, 3 days later, they're leading a sneak attack on your lord's outpost because of a 3-year-old grudge you didn't even know existed. It's not paranoia if everyone really is plotting. Feudal. Japan isn't one big battlefield, a web of shifting alliances, family rivalries, and power plays so delicate they'd make a modern politician sweat. You could train under a master for 10 years, pledge your loyalty, and then watch him defect for a better rice deal. The next day, you might be expected to fight him, or protect him, or avenge him. Depending on which scroll got stamped that morning, you start learning the warning signs. When a fellow samurai starts complimenting your technique a little too much. When a retainer suddenly gives you an expensive gift. When a tea ceremony invitation arrives with no occasion. These things don't mean goodwill. They mean something's coming. Historians still argue whether samurai genuinely lived by the principles of loyalty, or simply used them as armor to disguise ruthless ambition. Some say the code was aspirational, not practical, a way to inspire warriors even if most still acted like power-hungry chess pieces. You see both sides of that debate every day, because sometimes you're the chess piece, and sometimes you're the one making the move. There are rules, of course. You don't attack from behind, lest the other guy broke his vows. You don't kill a messenger, lest he insults your lord. You don't lie, lest it's to protect your master, your name, or the state of your bank account. In other words, the code has flexibility. You remember your first official duel. Not a battlefield charge or a sneak attack, but a clean, sanctioned, we've got witnesses, and everything kind of duel. Your opponent was a smug, sharp-cheekboned samurai from a rival domain who claimed your poetry was derivative. That's right, you almost died over iambic slander. It was over in 3 moves. You parried, twisted, and landed a cut across his thigh, enough to prove a point. Not enough to kill. You bowed afterward. He bowed too, grudgingly. And then you both limped off to get bandaged, like proper, stoic men. Later, you heard he wrote a haiku about the pain. You didn't read it. You heard it was mediocre. But not all fights end so cleanly. You've seen skirmishes over land inheritance turn into multi-family blood feuds. You've watched a lord betray his closest advisors, just to preserve a treaty with a stronger neighbor. Once, you stood guard, while 2 envoys drank tea in perfect silence, knowing full well one had ordered the other's brother assassinated the week before. Even your friends sometimes walk on tightropes. One of them, Kenji, once quietly confessed over a late night rice ball that he wasn't sure he could trust anyone in his unit anymore. A week later, he disappeared during patrol. You still don't know whether he fled or was silenced. His name wasn't mentioned again. You've learned to keep your back to the wall and your reactions unreadable. A blank face is your best defense. Your sword may be sheathed, but your mind is always drawn. Still, among all this scheming, you hold fast to something deeper: loyalty. The one thread that, if pulled too hard, unravels everything. You serve your daimyo, your feudal lord, with a devotion that borders on obsession. If he tells you to die, you do it. If he tells you to stand down, you sheathe your blade even if your blood boils. Because without loyalty, you're just another armed man in fancy pajamas. But even loyalty has limits. As you've come to learn, what happens when your lord begins acting erratically? When his decisions put your comrades in danger? When his enemies start to look less like villains and more like men with painful histories and good reasons? You once served during a campaign where your unit was ordered to burn a rival village homes, crops, and all. You followed orders. Everyone did, but the image of that old woman screaming beside a flaming rice paddy still visits your dreams. She wasn't your enemy, but she was someone's grandmother, someone's life. You've never questioned a command out loud, but sometimes, when the wind is quiet and the moon casts long shadows, you wonder, what if Bushido eyes and tea about obedience? What if it's about conscience? That thought is dangerous. You tuck it away like a forbidden letter, unread but unforgettable. And yet, through all of it, the deception, the duels, the friends who vanish, the lords who shift like weather, you remain a samurai, not because it's easy, not because it's clean, but because even when the world's around you slips into betrayal, you carry your own truth like a blade kept razor-sharp. You bow, you bleed, and you rise again. Because loyalty, in the end, isn't about them, it's about you. There's a quiet stillness in the tea room. Tatami mats beneath your knees. The soft hiss of boiling water in a black iron kettle. Steam curls into the air like a ghost. You sit, perfectly straight, your hands folded, your sword left respectfully. Outside, for now, this is not a place of violence. But it doesn't mean you're at peace. Because behind the bamboo walls and wafting scent of roasted green tea, you know the real training never stops. The tea ceremony, the brushwork, the bowing, it all sharpens your mind for the moment when life demands blood. In fact, that moment may come just after you sip. This is the strange duality of your life as a samurai. One part calm serenity, one part sudden brutality. Zen, tea, and sudden violence. Like breathing in a cherry blossom and exhaling a war cry, your day might begin in a Zen garden. breaking gravel into patterns meant to mirror the natural flow of rivers. You try to empty your thoughts to become nothing. But behind the stillness lies razor awareness. Zen doesn't make you soft. It makes you clear, focused, able to strike without hesitation, without fear. Your master once told you, when you can cut with the same mind that you drink tea, you will understand the way. You didn't believe him until you spent an afternoon slicing down straw men while birds chirped peacefully in the trees above you. Now you get it, kind of. You're taught to meditate on death every morning. Not morbidly, not fearfully, just practically. It's a companion. You bow to it, smile at it. That way, if it shows up in the middle of dinner or during a rainstorm ambush, you won't be caught off guard. Historians still argue whether this spiritual overlay was truly embraced by most samurai, or simply promoted later to romanticize the warrior class. But for you, the inner training is as constant as the outer drills. You spend just as much time in quiet stillness as in sparring halls. And sometimes the stillness is harder. There's also the matter of tea. Yes, actual tea. You think it's just hot leaf water. Think again. The tea ceremony is ritual at its most refined. You're expected to know every movement. How to turn the cup, how to bow, how to comment on the froth with just the right level of poetic detachment. Fumble the whisk, and you're not just clumsy or culturally bankrupt, but behind the gentle slurps and soft silences is control. It's all about discipline, awareness, and masking every flicker of ego. Because if you can master this absurdly complex tea dance without throwing your bowl at someone's head, you're halfway too. Mastering your emotions in combat. You once attended a tea gathering, where everyone sat quietly for 2 hours before anyone spoke, and when they did, it was about the grain of the wooden ladle. You nearly fell asleep, but you also realized, this is training, not for your blade, but for your soul, and possibly your lower back. Still, don't let the softness fool you. After tea, your group moves to the practice field. No talking, just swift movements, straw targets, and the sharp shunk of blades slicing through air. You practice kesagiri, the downward diagonal cut, over and over, left shoulder to right hip, again and again, until your hands are raw and your mind is empty. You once saw a man slice through 3 stacked tatami mats with a single stroke. The audience didn't applaud, they just nodded. Respect is silent in your world, and you don't just practice on straw. Some lords keep prisoners for live blade training. It's disturbing and rare, but it happens. You've never participated, but you've heard stories. One samurai vomited after his first try. Another grew so fond of the condemned man that he let him go, and was later punished. The whole thing leaves a taste in your mouth, worse than bad sake. But violence isn't only about the body, it's also about timing. You learn to strike before a threat forms. If someone reaches for a weapon in court, you're expected to move, before your brain finishes the thought. One moment, you're sipping soup. The next, you're pinning a man's sleeve with your short blade, eyes still calm, soup still hot. You train for these moments constantly. Drills, reflex tests, mock attacks. During breakfast, one time, your instructor dropped a rice bowl from behind you, while yelling draw. You sliced through the air, before it even shattered on the floor. He nodded. You didn't breathe for 5 seconds, but the real challenge is staying calm. You're taught to fight without emotion, not cold, but clear. Fury clouds your form, panic wastes movement. You've seen skilled warriors lose duels, not because they lacked ability, but because they wanted it too much. Desire gets in the way. Detachment wins. There's a saying, the perfect cut happens in the space between breaths. You don't just believe it, now you live it. You breathe, strike, and step away in one motion, like the wind through reeds. Still, not every moment is so poetic. Once, during a formal gathering, a guest dropped his cup and reached down too quickly. Half the room reached for their swords, including you. He was just picking up a persimmon. You all laughed awkwardly, then practiced drawing again. Just in case, so you continue this strange routine. Meditate, drill, sip, slash, sit. Strike your life is a rhythm of restraint and release. You wear both your serenity and your sharpness like layers of invisible armor. And when the world calls you to violence, you don't answer with rage. You answer like tea boiling in a kettle, slow, steady, and deadly if poured too fast. You are a samurai. You are the silence before the blade. They call her a samurai's daughter, but you know better. She is a samurai, and not just by blood, but by blade. Your sister wakes earlier than you, practices longer than you, and doesn't flinch when her sparring partners are twice her size. She ties her hakama with the same precise fingers that braid your mother's hair. Then she sharpens her naginata, wicked, curved pole weapon that dances through the air like a silk ribbon with a sting, in the stories they tell in the inns. And among the village fires, samurai are always mengritajad, stoic, horse-bound warriors who fight for honor, for vengeance, for lords. But in your house, and in more places than people care to admit, samurai women are just as real, just as lethal, and often more committed than the men they're sworn to serve. Beside or outlive, her name is Ked, and she doesn't need a title to be feared. She learned to fight not in some dusty courtyard, but in the shadow of war. When your father left to serve in a border skirmish, the household was left in her care. Bandits came. She didn't run. She armed the servants. She hid the children in the storeroom. And when they broke through the gate, she fought. 3 dead. 1 escaped with an arm hanging uselessly. That was the first time anyone dared call her Onabagage female warrior. The court poets rarely mention women like her. The official records omit their victories, reduce them to wives, widows, or distant shadows of men. But Kedger's sister knows her history. She reminds you over rice and miso that Tomo Gozen once rode into battle, her armor gleaming like a silver moon, felling warriors with a bow, and slicing down men who dared to laugh. She tells you about Nakano Takeko, who died with her sword buried in a soldier's chest, writing her own epitaph with blood and pride. Ked trains like these legends are watching. Her armor is lighter than yours, more flexible, made for movement, but it's no less real. The breastplate bears your family crest, just like yours. Her sleeves are stitched with lacquered splints that can deflect a blade. She wears her hair coiled tightly beneath a headscarf, so it won't get caught in combat. And her naginata, it sings. You've seen her take down 2 opponents in a single spin. 1 slice at the ankle, the other across the chest. When she moves, it's like water in a storm, beautiful and devastating. Of course, not everyone approves. Some whisper that she's unfeminine, a danger to the natural order. Others try to shame her back into the shadows, with talk of marriage, children, duty. Your mother used to worry until Ked saved her life from a rogue Ronin with a flash of steel. Now she worries differently. You've seen how much she carries, not just weapons, but burdens. She trains twice as hard because she has to prove herself. Twice as much. She wears silence like a shield. When guests scoff or look past her, she smiles that quiet smile of hers, and doesn't correct them. She lets the blade speak. And yet, she is not only strength. She kneels at your father's grave with tears. She tends to wounded animals, and saves cherry blossoms in books. She weaves silk ribbons, and teaches the village girls how to write their names in brush calligraphy. She is every bit a warrior, but she is not hardened, not hollow. She has not let this world drain her soul dry. You try to match her balance. You fail more often than you'd admit. One winter, when a minor lord insulted her in court call, her a dancing sword meant only for Shoshi, challenged him politely, formally, and when he laughed and declined, she waited 3 months, trained harder, found him drunk in a garden. When he lunged, she ended it with 1 thrust through the gut. The court ruled it self-defense. Everyone knew it wasn't. Everyone respected it anyway. She returned home with a blood-stained sleeve and said nothing for 3 days. You wonder sometimes what would happen if more people knew about women like her. If the bards sang her name. If the histories included the nights she stood guard while you slept. If the emperors wrote laws that recognized the calluses on her hands as equal to any samurai's oath. But Ked doesn't ask to be recognized. She expects it. Quietly, relentlessly. She doesn't need the world to catch up. She's already moving forward. You train with her each morning, sweat dripping into your eyes, your muscles screaming to keep pace. And when she corrects your footwork, you don't feel shame. You feel gratitude. To be learning from someone who walks the same path with even more grace. Your father once said, "Steel bends differently when held by a woman." Ked proved. It doesn't bend at all. In the end, she may not wear the same armor as the men. She may not inherit land or rank, but she wears the same scars. She fights the same battles. She faces death with the same cold calm. And when the next war comes and, it always does, you know she will be at your side. Blade gleaming, eyes steady, not behind you. Beside you, she is your sister. Your equal, a samurai in full. You don't become a true samurai just by being born into a clan. You have to earn it every single morning, under the weight of armor and expectations. And at the heart of that endless proving ground is the dojo. Today. The sliding paper doors creak open before the sun has fully risen. You step inside, and the scent of sweat-soaked tatami mats hits you. Not unpleasant, just a kind of ever-present musk that says, "This place has seen pain." Your bare feet press into the woven straw as you bow low at the threshold. Behind you, others do the same. Silence folds over everyone like a second robe. You don't speak here unless instructed to. In the dojo, the only voices that matter are the master's commands, the hiss of practice swords cutting air, and the occasional grunt as someone hits the floor. Your master, old and wiry as a winter pine, stands still as a statue in the center. His name is Genshiro. No one knows how old he really is. 60, 80. Maybe he's just been around since the Kamakura period and no one ever noticed. He has eyes like storm clouds, quiet, slow, and dangerous. When he lifts a bakina wooden practice sword, it moves faster than your eyes can follow. You've seen him split a sake bottle from 10 paces with a single flick. You've also seen him whack a cocky student across the shins for not bowing. Deeply enough, he speaks little. His disapproval says enough. The dojo isn't just a training ground, it's a crucible. You come here to burn away weakness. Genshiro teaches more than combat. He teaches restraint. The sword is not for killing, he says one afternoon, as you pant and tremble after sparring. It is for choosing when not to kill. You'll forget that sometimes. Most samurai do. Today's drills are brutal. You and a dozen others move through kata, the preset forms that teach fluid motion, timing, and precision. Boken clash with bone-shaking force. Sweat pours into your eyes. Your knuckles split. You try to hide the flinch when your partner clips your ribs. Genshiro watches with no hint of sympathy. You repeat the same motion again and again until your muscles no longer question. Until the act of striking, blocking, evading becomes instinct. Not fast, not fleshy correct, and that's what matters. Historians still argue whether the samurai trained daily, or mostly when war loomed. The truth, that depends on the lord, the region, and the century. But here, in this dojo, every morning is war. Even if the battlefield is just a straw mat and a glint of late sun. One of the newer students, fresh from a merchant family, tries to show off, spins a little too much flair into his footwork. Genshiro stops the class. No yelling, just a quiet nod. The boy must now spar against the 3 eldest students in turn. He doesn't last through the second match. His pride breaks before his nose does. Afterwards, he thanks Genshiro for the lesson. He does it with a bloody grin and tears streaming down his cheeks. That's how it works here. The dojo breaks you so it can remake you. And it's not just swordsmanship. You train with the yumi, the massive longbow that takes more back strength than most people think possible. You learn how to shoot not by sight, but by breath. Release at the exhale. Let the arrow fly like a thought knot, a command. Then there's Ido, the art of drawing and striking in a single motion. This is where the truly good samurai reveal themselves. It's not about speed, it's about readiness. You kneel, you wait, you draw. The sword whispers out of its sheath and slices through the air in one fluid arc. If you hesitate, you die. Quirky. Detail. You once trained beside a samurai who swore by whispering the name of his favorite tea as he drew. Said it calmed the blade and focused the spirit. You tried it once. Got laughed at for 2 weeks. Never again. There's no shortage of discipline here. Everyone's gear must be spotless. You clean your blade, daily, even the practice ones. Uniforms pressed, feet washed, bow taken with exact angles. It's not just OCD. It's part of Bushido, the way of the warrior. The idea that discipline off the field makes you unshakable on it. And Bushido isn't all about blood and blade. Genshiro makes you write poetry, not optional. Every week, a new versifying about impermanence, about leaves falling, or plum blossoms blooming for one night only. You once wrote a haiku about stepping on a snail by accident. It got more praise than your last 10 sparring matches. Because to be a true samurai, you must live in full awareness of life, of death, of snails, apparently. Lunch is rice, pickles, miso soup. Eaten in silence, with deep bows. No complaints. Even if the rice is crunchy in the afternoons, sparring intensifies. You square off against Ked. She's faster than you, more agile, but you've been lifting heavier. The match ends with both of you collapsed in a heap, laughing until Genshiro tells you to clean the sweat off the floor before someone slips and dies. Not a joke. He's serious. You stay late sometimes, sweeping the tatami while Genshiro meditates. You think he's asleep, but then he says, "Sweep the corners too." That's where the ghosts gather. You don't ask what ghosts, you just sweep. And then, with the sun dipping behind the pine trees, the day ends. Your body aches, your palms are raw. But something inside you feels taller, sharper, quieter. The dojo is a sacred place. It grinds you into someone better. And in a world where death can come with one wrong word or gesture, that might just be the only real safety you have. The sun hasn't even crested the mountains yet, and already the courtyard outside your lord's castle is buzzing. Messengers dash across gravel paths. Horses snort and stamp, restless with tension. You stand beside your fellow samurai, your armor fully strapped, your katana gleaming. This morning is different. This morning, you're going to war, not a skirmish, not a show of force, but a real campaign long planned, quietly whispered about in the dojo corridors. The kind of war where heads roll before the banners even rise. And banners, yes, they're everywhere. Silk streamers flap in the breeze, emblazoned with the mon of your clan. A pair of crossed falcon feathers on a black disc. You spent last night painting it onto your backplate by candlelight. Every samurai does. You'd rather die than let it get torn from you on the field. You're not marching out alone. The army gathering today is massive reckoners, ashigaru, foot soldiers, banner carriers, supply runners, and mounted scouts. Some ride in on sleek war horses. Others carry bamboo spears over their shoulders, mouths dry, eyes wide. This will be their first real fight, not yours. This will be your third campaign. You've been tested. You've seen death up close. You've watched a man choke on his own blood while trying to apologize to his horse. And yet, your gut still knots as the war drums sound. Before departure, there's a short ritual incense chants. A priest blessing each warrior with whispered mantras, and a quick flick of holy water. You kneel for a moment longer than necessary, your forehead pressed against the cool ground. You don't pray for victory. You pray for clarity so you won't hesitate when it matters. The march begins. It's a thudding rhythm of feet on dirt roads, punctuated by the occasional neigh or clank of gear. For days, you travel through forest trails, over narrow bridges, across windswept rice fields. Farmers pause in their planting to bow as you pass. You don't meet their eyes. That would break the illusion. Eventually, you reach the staging grounds, up clearing beside a fast river. Here, the real waiting begins. Armies don't crash into each other the moment they meet. No, this is chess. There are negotiations, espionage, terrain scouting. Signal fires on nearby hills blink silently in the night, carrying messages you'll never see but will live or die by. During the lull, the camp settles into its own rhythm. You practice sword drills at dawn. Clean your armor until it blinds. The sunrise. Maintain your bowstrings, and you wait. But the hardest part is not knowing. Will the enemy strike first? Will your side? What if they ambush you in the dark? What if your commander decides to send your unit into the bloodiest stretch of battle, just to make a point? These thoughts fester. You quiet them with meditation, tea, and the slow sharpening of your blade. Then, without warning, it happens. Rider gallops in from the east, covered in mud, panting. They move before dawn, he gasps. Everything goes quiet. No formal speech. No inspirational talk from your commander. Just the metallic click of helmets being fastened, and swords being drawn. Your unit moves silently through a misty field. The wet grass soaks your feet, and frogs croak somewhere just beyond sight. You crouch in the reeds, watching the distant flicker of enemy torches. They don't know you're coming. The attack is swift. A flurry of war cries, a burst of flaming arrows, and you're off charging like a tidal wave of lacquered steel and sharpened will. You don't think. You don't feel. You act. Your katana slices through air and flesh. You deflect a spear with the flat of your blade, twist and drive your hilt into an enemy's jaw. Blood mists your vision. Someone screams behind you. You pivot to. Late, a pike clips your shoulder, spinning you sideways. You land hard, but roll back to your feet. You spot Ked in the chaos, her helmet gone. Her hair slick with blood, but she's still fighting, eyes wild with focus. She nods once. That's all. Then she's gone again. You push forward, strike after strike, until the lines break and you can't tell whose banner is whose. The enemy retreats before noon. Some surrender, others vanish into the woods. The field is a mess of trampled grass, broken weapons, and bodies, some still, some moaning. You stagger to a halt. You're alive. And now comes the part no one talks about. Collecting heads. It's not about cruelty. It's about record keeping. Proof of who killed whom. Proof of honor. You wipe your blade, kneel by a fallen enemy, and with practiced precision, the head, then another. It's grim, mechanical. You don't flinch anymore. Some samurai carry small paper tags to write the names of those they've killed, tying them to the hair of the severed head, like macabre nameplates. You have 5 heads today. A good day, by this culture's brutal logic. Back in camp, the heads are washed and displayed for your lord to inspect. He sits on a raised dais, calm as ever, nodding silently as each warrior presents their trophies. When your turn comes, you bow low, place the heads on the lacquered tray, and step back. He pauses, then he nods once. You exhale. Later that night, the air is thick with the scent of roasting meat and spilled sake. Victory is celebrated, not with song, but with quiet camaraderie. You sit with your unit around a low fire, eating rice balls and nursing bruises. Someone passes you a gourd of sake you drink, but the celebration is muted. You all know it could have gone another way. That next time it might. Your armor, still, smeared with blood, rests beside you. You should clean it. You will, eventually. For now, you close your eyes and let the fire's warmth soak into your tired bones. This is war, samurai style, not glorious, not noble, just necessary. And you'll do it again tomorrow if ordered, because that's what loyalty means. Days pass, the war front stabilizes. You're no longer fighting battles every morning, but now you're living the long, slow grind of siege warfare, and it's miserable. You're stationed outside an enemy fortress, perched high on a rocky ridge like a smug eagle. The castle's walls are thick, steep, and built to last. Getting in by force would be suicide. So instead, you wait, and starve them out. Siege warfare, for a samurai, is a study in extremes. One day you're hurling flaming arrows at wooden watchtowers, and the next, you're boiling rice over a fire made from broken arrows. The days drag on, blending into each other like endless lines of mud-caked boots. You're responsible for patrols, for inspecting the bamboo barriers, and for keeping your Ashigaro troops from deserting in the night. They're poor, hungry, and afraid, and they don't have the kind of ideological armor Bushido provides you. If they run, you report it. If they disobey, you discipline them. Harshly. Sometimes that means striking a man across the face with the flat of your blade. Sometimes it means executing someone in front of the others. You don't like it? But it's how order survives. The enemy is crafty. They try to sneak out under cover of fog to gather herbs and water. Sometimes you catch them and take them prisoner. Other times, they vanish into the woodsand, then reappear behind your supply lines. You sleep with one eye open. Your sword never leaves your side. The monotony is broken only by skirmishes, quick, brutal exchanges at the edge of the siege line. They test your defenses. You test theirs. But it's mostly psychological. Death by attrition. To break the tedium, you train. Morning sword drills. Afternoon archery. Evening poetry. Yes, poetry. Because even here, in the shadow of violence, the soul needs cultivation. You sit under a scorched pine tree and compose a haiku. Blades rust in moonlight. Rice is gone, but honor stays. Crows feast silently. You etch it into a bamboo slat and tie it to your tent post. Other samurai do the same. Some are warriors. Others are artists. Most are both. But poetry doesn't fill your stomach. Rations thin out. Your rice is mixed with bark. Your tea tastes like ashes. One night, your best friend, Akira, collapses mid-drill. You drag him into the medic tent yourself. Heatstroke, malnutrition. The healer shrugs. Maybe he lives. Maybe he doesn't. Akira survives, but he's never the same. He stares through people now, like his soul has stepped out to wait somewhere quieter. Then comes the order you've been dreading. The Lord wants volunteers for a night assault on a side gate recently weakened by rain. It's dangerous, probably suicidal, but if it works, the siege could end in days. You step forward. Why? You're not entirely sure. Maybe it's duty, maybe boredom. Maybe you just want the noise to start again, because this waiting is louder than swords ever were. That night, you and 10 others crawl through thorns in silence. The moon is hidden. The crickets stop singing. You reach the gate. A sliver of moonlight glints off the enemy's armor. 2 guards, maybe more beyond. You signal with your hand. Everyone fans out. Then chaos. You leap, blade first, into one guard before he even turns. Another raises the alarm, but your comrades are faster. It's over in seconds, but the gate doesn't budge. It's been barricaded from within. You're trapped. Arrows rain down from above. You press against the stone, heart thundering. One man screams. Another is silent, but doesn't get up. You retreat under cover of smoke bombs and curses. Back at camp, your lord doesn't scold you. He nods once. A test, he says. You did well. You feel nothing. No pride, no shame. Just the familiar weight of surviving again. 2 days later, the castle falls anyway. Turns out their food stores ran out. They sent out a white banner, and the gates opened slowly, groaning like they were ashamed. You march inside and see them, the defeated, hollow-eyed, dirty, some clutching children, a few samurai, 2 pilled thin, kneeling in seiza position, awaiting their fate. Your lord is merciful. Most are spared. But a few are ordered to commit seppuku ritual suicide. You stand as witness. One of them is your age. He doesn't tremble. He removes his armor carefully, folds it like a prayer, and kneels. His kishikun, the one who will behead him after the stomach cut, is his own younger brother. You watch. The man takes the tanto. He bows, then slices his belly sideways, then upward. He doesn't scream. His brother raises the katana, swings, and ends it. You close your eyes. But not fast enough. That night, the camp is quiet again. You clean your blade, polish your armor, and wonder how much longer this war will last. But even in silence, you know, as long as honor exists, so will men like you. You return home weeks later, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. The village greets you with bowed heads, gifts of salted fish, and the awkward silence of people who aren't sure how to speak to a man who's watched others die by moonlight. Children peek at you from behind their mother's sleeves. One brave little boy blurts, "Did you kill 100 men?" You lie and say no. You killed fewer than that. But the ones you did kill follow you anyway in dreams, in sudden sounds. In the reflection of your blade, when you shave in the morning, your lord praises you. You're rewarded with a small plot of land on the edge of a neighboring province. It comes with 3 farm families, a grove of plum trees, and a stream full of lazy trout. It should feel like a promotion, a reward. But mostly it feels like exile. Being a samurai in peacetime is a strange kind of imprisonment. You're no longer called to kill, but you're also not allowed to forget how. You walk around in armor that clinks in the morning, quiet like it no longer belongs. The sword at your hip feels heavier when it's not needed. So you perform your duties. You resolve petty disputes between villagers, supervise rice planting, collect taxes, and teach the local boys how to hold a wooden sword without slicing their toes off. At night, you drink tea and listen to the frogs in the rice paddies. You write poetry again, less about blood, more about clouds. One poem reads, "Armor in storage. The moon forgets how to bleed. I wait for nothing." You smile at your own cleverness, but you also mean it. Without war, your skills dull. But more dangerously, your sense of self begins to unravel. Samurai were forged for conflict. Without it, you're just a well-dressed bureaucrat with too many knives. That's why so many samurais, especially the younger ones, seek out duels. Not for revenge, not even for victory, but for purpose. You hear about one such duel from a traveling monk, a 15-year-old boy from a nearby clan. Recently elevated to samurai, is challenging seasoned warriors at roadside inns. He's undefeated, arrogant, and clearly looking to die. You should ignore it, but something inside you stirs. You remember what it felt like to be that boy, so you go. The duel is set outside a shrine, under a torii gate, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims. You arrive early, sit on a rock, watch the wind, stir the maple leaves. He arrives, late typical. He's cocky. His sword gleams like it's never seen real blood. His eyes flick over you with open disdain. "You're older than I expected," he says. You nod. "You're younger than you'll ever be again." That throws him off a bit. Good that shrine priest officiates. You bow. He bows. Then it begins. The boy lunges fast and wide. His footwork is beautiful, but loud. You sidestep parry. Tap his shoulder with your blade's flat edge. Point you. He adjusts. Comes again. This time, tighter angled. You meet him blade to blade. Sparks fly. You twist, disarm him, and knock him to the ground. Point you again. He stays there, breathing hard, looking up at the sky like it betrayed him. You offer your hand. He takes it. "I thought I was ready to die," he says quietly. "You were," you reply. "That's the problem." He nods, eyes wide with understanding. You've seen that look before in your own reflection, once upon a time. The boy bows low. "Thank you, sensei." You're not his teacher, but maybe you are now. Word spreads. Quickly. Soon, other young samurai begin visiting your estate to learn. You don't advertise. You don't charge. But they come anyway. Hungry for more than swordplay. You teach them calligraphy, ethics, meditation. You tell them war stories, but only the boring parts. Waiting, hunger, regret, and some of them stay. You build a small dojo. Your students sweep the floors every morning, arrange flowers at the altar, and listen when you speak. It's peaceful. Then, one evening, a scroll arrives, bearing your lord's seal. Another province is rising in rebellion. Your name is on the list. You're needed again. You close the scroll. Sit in the doorway of your modest home. The wind smells like distant fire. You feel something strange, not dread, not excitement, just inevitability. You call your students together the next morning, line them up. Some are trembling, others stare at you like you hold the answer to a question they're afraid to ask. You speak softly. "You will all come with me. Not because I command it, but because war is part of this path. If you fear it, that's good. Fear keeps you alive." One boy raises his hand. "Sensei, will we have to kill?" You look at him, look past him, to the mountains in the distance, cloaked in mist. "Yes," you say, "but we'll do it with full hearts." And so, once more, you begin to sharpen your sword. Not just the blade, but the spirit behind it. You write a final haiku before leaving. A path in silence. Even stones remember war. So do I still. You ride out again, but this time the weight in your chest, is heavier than the armor on your back. Your students trail behind Ullus, like warriors, more like ducklings. Some are barely out of childhood, but each wears their blades with solemn pride. They believe in you. That's the problem. The journey to the rebellious province takes 5 days. You pass through villages that pretend not to be afraid, but shutters close a little faster as you approach. Once, a child throws a stone. It misses, barely. You're no longer the people's protector in their eyes. You're a symbol of the very violence they pray to avoid. At night, you sit by the fire with your students. They chatter, trying to lighten the mood. One tells a joke about a blind monk and a chicken. It's truly terrible. But everyone laughs because silence feels worse. You don't laugh. You're watching the sky again. It's dark, but not silent. The wind is picking up. You always get that feeling before battle, like the world is holding its breath. By the 6th day, you reach the garrison on the border of the rebel territory. It's chaos. Half the officers are too young, the other half too drunk. Supplies are short, morale even shorter. Your reputation precedes you. The commander, a man who looks like he bathes in say, asks if you'll lead a scouting party. You agree, not because you want to, but because you need to see what's coming. The rebels aren't bandits or outlaws. They're samurai too disenfranchised, bitter, and trained, just like you. Some are even former classmates from your youth. You recognize a few in the distance, armored in patchwork gear, standing tall behind makeshift fortifications. One locks eyes with you across the battlefield. You nod. He nods. No hate, just inevitability. Historians still argue whether this rebellion was political, economic, or merely the eruption of long-simmering pride. Maybe all three. Maybe none. You stopped caring about the why a long time ago. What you care about now is getting your students home alive. The battle begins at sunrise. You stand at the front line, heart steady, blade loose in your grip. Your students form a ragged line behind you. They're scared, you can smell it, but they don't run. The first charge is brutal. Arrows rain like winter hail. A man beside you takes one in the neck and cripples. You duck low, leading your students through a broken flank, cutting through chaos like a needle threading fate. You fight differently now, not for glory, not even for survival. You fight to protect. You pull. One boy can tarrow out of a downward strike just in time. He thanks you by vomiting into a bush minutes later. You're not a disgrace, you whisper. You're human. The rebels fight with terrifying precision. They're desperate, which makes them brave. You're pinned for hours, moving between bamboo groves and ruined watchtowers, holding what little ground you can. And then you see him, the rebel commander. Once a childhood rival, his name was Daesuk, but you always called him Ox because of his size and stubbornness. He sees you too, raises his blade in a gesture that means, let's settle this the old way. You nod. You walk toward each other. While the war trembles around you, no words, just the hum of steel. He strikes first wide and punishing. You counter, duck low, slide to the right. The rhythm returns like an old song. It's a long dance. Minutes blur. Blood beads. Sweat stings. Then you find the opening. You don't kill him. You disarm him. Hold your blade to his throat. He spits. Finish it. You don't. Instead, you say, we're too old for this, Ox. He laughs. Speak for yourself. You step back. He nods. Yells to his men. A horn sounds. The rebels stop fighting. They withdraw. Not a surrender, exactly, but an ending. Later, over sake and drying wounds, Daesuk explains. They wouldn't follow me into another day of blood, but they'd follow you if you said there's another way. You say nothing, but your silence agrees. When you return to the garrison, you're greeted with cheers. Your students are wide-eyed, limping, proud and alive. You're offered a title, a pension, even a ceremonial robe, dyed in imperial crimson. You decline most of it. Instead, you ask for a shrine to be built, not for the dead but for those who returned changed. The shrine stands near the edge of the battlefield, beneath a gnarled pine tree that somehow didn't burn. It bears no names, just a single phrase carved in kanji, we remember. Your students return to their families, their villages, their dojos. Some become teachers. One becomes a monk. Another opens a sake brewery and names his strongest batch after you. You remain in your little house near the stream. You tend the plum trees. You write haiku that never quite rhyme. You forget to polish your armor. You don't forget the faces. The war is over, but the quiet feels louder than it used to. One evening, a traveler arrives. A young woman with calloused hands and a stubborn jaw. She bows and says, "My grandfather was your student. He said you once taught the blade like it was a brush." You smile. She asks, "Will you teach me to?" You look at your old sword, now dulled with age, and then at the sun setting behind the mountains. You say, "I will teach you not to need it." And just like that, the story continues. The seasons roll on like an old drumbeat, steady and familiar. You don't need to mark time with a calendar anymore. You feel it in the soil, in the wind, in the way the frogs return to the stream behind your house. Each spring you become less warrior and more gardener. You plant vegetables. You trim your plum trees. You patch your roof slowly, not because it's hard, but because there's no need to rush. Every now and then, people still find you. A boy with a stammer, who can't look his father in the eye. A woman too angry to speak without clenching her fists. A drunk with shaking hands and a story he's never told anyone sober. They come not for swordplay, but for stillness. For answers you no longer pretend to have. You tell them stories instead. You talk about battles, not as glories, but as lessons. You tell them about the time your horse bit you in front of a princess. About the general who cried when his favorite teacup broke. About the rebel who gave up a war for a family. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they laugh. Most leave lighter than they arrived. You never ask for anything in return, except maybe help hauling water or splitting firewood. You still enjoy the feel of a sharp axe in your hand. It reminds you that strength isn't just for hurting things. It can build a life too. One spring morning, a letter arrives. Rare these days. It's from a magistrate you trained once. She's older now, her handwriting looser. She tells you that the Tokugawa peace has hardened. There are new laws, stricter controls. The shogunate no longer wants wandering ronin, no matter how honorable. You're being politely warned. Keep your head down, you already were. But something in the letter unsettles you. The words no longer needed ring louder than intended. You burn the letter in your hearth that night, watching the ash swirl up like phantom ink. The days get quieter after that. Visitors slow. The country turns inward, curling into itself like a sleeping cat. You take up ink painting. You sketch the birds you see, the fish in the stream, the gnarled hands that no longer grip a sword with certainty. You sign each piece with a red stamp that simply says, "Still here." Then one evening, just before the fireflies begin to dance, a messenger appears. He's young, terrified, bowing so hard his forehead thumps. The floor he brings news. A foreign ship has arrived. Big, black, belching smoke. Its cannons glint like teeth. The foreign men wear strange clothes, speak strange tongues, and demand strange things. The shogunate is shaken. Japan's door, long sealed shut, is being pried open. You listen in silence. Will there be war again? The boy asks, voice trembling. You stand, stretch. Your bones crack like bamboo in frost. "I hope not," you say, but the world doesn't ask what we hope. You retrieve your sword from its resting place on the shrine shelf. It feels heavy, not from age, but from memory. The blade still shines, but not like before. This time, it reflects not firelight or blood, but the trembling face of a boy who still believes in heroes. You place the sword back down. No, you tell him gently, if war comes, it won't be mine to fight. He nods, unsure. You give him tea, rice, a bed for the night. In the morning, he's gone. You sit by the stream again, watching dragonflies skim the surface. You think about everything that came before glory, loss, betrayal, honor, all wrapped into one long, impossible story. It feels distant now, like a book you once read under candlelight, whose ending you can't quite recall. That evening, a girl appears or 9 years old, missing a front tooth. swinging a wooden stick like a sword. She bows awkwardly and says, "Teach me." You raise your eyebrow, she says, "Not fighting. Just standing tall." You chuckle. "The best lesson of all." You nod. "Start with your feet." You tell her, "They're the roots. Everything grows from there." She giggles, begins her awkward stances. You correct her gently. Straighten her back. Show her how to breathe, not to strike like this better, you say. Try again. The sun dips behind the hills, and the shadows grow long, but you don't stop. She doesn't want to, neither do you. The cicadas hum like ghosts of summer past, and in that moment, something soft opens inside you, like a door, or maybe a memory, because this is what remains when the sword is set down. This is what lasts, not battle, not victory, but passing it on without violence, without fear. Just calm grace, and the steady rhythm of a girl learning to stand tall. Your days begin to stretch like warm dough, slow and pliable. Morning comes with the gentle creak of old wood, and the soft thump of a bird landing on your roof. You rise without urgency. No missions, no masters, no mandates. Just the hush of rural life and the small rhythms you've grown to cherish. Water from the well, rice warmed from last night's pot, and the careful arrangement of your ink brushes by the window, where the light is best. The girl comes back every day. Her name is Yui, and she insists she's descended from a war hero. You don't correct her. Why should you? Everyone deserves a myth to live by. You train her the way you wished you had been trained. Gently, slowly, with silence just as important as speech. The sword she holds is still wooden, but her gaze sharpens. She walks taller now, balanced, like she's always aware of the earth beneath her. One afternoon, she brings her brother. He's younger, quieter, but observant. He watches every move you make, like your very breath might be a secret technique. And so, you begin again. 2 students, then 3, then 5. It happens without plan. Word travels fast in the countryside. They call you Sensei of the Hills. You never asked for that, but you don't mind it either. You don't teach them combat. Not really. You teach them how to breathe when they're afraid, how to bow when they've made a mistake, how to fall, and how to rise again with grace. Sometimes, you sparb. It's always gentle, like dance. A push here, a pivot there. No one bruises, no one bleeds. One boy brings a broken bakken he found near a river. You help him mend it. Another child confesses she can't read. You teach her with patience, using old scrolls and simple poems. One rainy evening, you find your students waiting outside anyway, soaked to the skin. You scold them gently, give them towels and warm soup. And still you teach, because this is not about swords anymore. It's about posture, presence, peace. You tell them stories. 2, not about war, but about people. A samurai who learned to paint after losing his hand. A merchant who disguised himself as a monk to escape a life of greed. A courtesan who memorized battle poems to teach her daughter's strength. The students ask, were they real? And you shrugged. Does it matter? Some nights, you sit by the fire and realize you no longer dream of combat. You dream of harvests, of laughter, of ink slowly soaking into parchment. But Japan begins to stir again. Whispers reach your village about treaties, signed under pressure. Foreign powers demanding ports and goods, and trade. About how the Tokugawa shogunate, that towering colossus of law and silence, is trembling at the edges. And somewhere out there, a boy you once sheltered now, a man is part of that storm. You wonder what he carries in his heart, if he remembers. Your lessons, Sensei. Yui asks one morning. What happens if the world changes again? You take a long breath. Then we change with it. But slowly, carefully. Like river stones wearing down in the water, not cracking in the wind. She nods, serious. She always is. Then she goes back to her stances, repeating each movement as if the world depends on it. Maybe it does. One night, an official scroll arrives, sealed in red lacquer. You haven't seen one in years. It says your name, your real name, the one you haven't heard spoken aloud since your last duel. It's a summons. The government is reforming. New structures, new army. They want advisors. Veterans. Men who understand discipline, but who've also known independence. Your name is on the list. You stare at the scroll for a long time. Yui finds you later, holding it like it might catch fire. Will you go? She asks. You don't answer. Not yet. That night, you sit outside, under stars brighter than you remember. The village is asleep. The world is quiet, holding its breath like a bow drawn back. You think about the years, the weight of the sword, the cost of obedience, the grief of battle, the simplicity of peace. The girl who learned to stand tall. You tuck the scroll away. You rise. And in the dark, you perform one last kata in old form, slow and deliberate. Each movement flows into the next, like wind over water. Your muscles. Remember, even if your bones protest, when you finish, you bow not to anyone in particular. Just to the night, just to everything you've been, and everything you might yet be. You wake to stillness, a soft hush wrapped around the valley like a blanket. Dew clings to the thatch roof. The rice paddies glisten in morning light, and a low mist curls around the hills. It is a quiet day. A final day. The scroll remains unopened. On your table, it hasn't moved. Neither have you. Not really. Yui comes early. No wooden sword today. Just a bundle of plum blossoms and a steaming bowl of miso. She says nothing as she sets them down, bowing deeper than usual, and walks away with the grace of someone trained in silence. The wind outside is soft, carrying with it the scent of something new. Change, maybe, or memory, or both. You step into your old armor, piece by piece. Not out of necessity, but out of respect. The plates are lighter than you remember. Or maybe your body simply carries them differently now. You fasten the final strap, then look at yourself in the mirror's reflection, a samurai again. But only in form, in spirit, you're something else, something more, something less. Sharp, you leave the house without locking it. What would be the point? You walk through the village. The children watch you with wide eyes. A few bow. One salutes like a soldier. You give him a small nod. They think you're going back to war. You're not. You board the boat that waits for you near the mouth of the river. The ferryman doesn't speak. He knows who you are. Or at least, he knows the story. Everyone knows the story. The water is calm. As the boat glides forward, the valley begins to fade behind you. Trees blur into shapes, mountains into mist. You feel the world widen, not in a threatening way, but like lungs. Expanding after holding breath too long. Your journey leads to a coastal town you haven't seen in decades. It's unfamiliar now, reshaped by traders and treaties, with signs in languages you can't read and ships that look like floating castles. The summons has led you here. To a compound where banners fly high and officials speak in clipped tones. They recognize you. One bows and leads you in. There, behind a desk, a former comrade greets you. Thinner now, hair gray. But the eyes still burn with ambition. He wants your help, wants you to shape the new army. Train them in discipline, in virtue, in loyalty. He speaks of honor, but also of factories and railroads and CEAMSHIPS. Japan is becoming modern. He says you could be a general. You say nothing for a long time. Finally, you ask, do you still believe in silence? He doesn't answer. Just frowns. You smile, just a little, then stand. I've trained enough. Back outside, the wind is stronger, saltier, filled with the strange new scent of coal smoke and ocean steel. It's not your wind anymore. You return to the village. That night, no one is surprised. Yui is waiting. You resume teaching, but it's different now. Slower, more thoughtful, less movement, more meaning. Some students leave, others stay. New ones come. One brings you a poem he wrote. Another asks if the world can be peaceful without swords. You tell them, maybe, but only if we teach each other how to breathe. You live for many more years, long enough to see the country change beyond recognition. The old ways crumble, castles repurposed, clans dissolved, samurai disbanded. Even the emperor walks differently, now guided by ministers, not myths, but in your little corner. Time folds gently. You stop carrying your sword, You learn to garden. You become a story whispered between rice stalks and plum trees. The samurai who taught peace with a sword he no longer used. And one quiet afternoon, as spring birds sing and plum blossoms fall like snow, you close your eyes for the last time. You are not in armor. You are not holding a blade. You are surrounded by wind, by earth, by breath, and by every lesson you ever gave away. And now, as your breathing slows with the rhythm of that distant life, let yourself drift gently toward rest. There's no more rushing, no more clashing steel or shouted orders. Just the soft crackle of an old floor beneath your feet, and the hush of wind whispering through bamboo groves. Picture the dojo, its wooden floor warm from afternoon sun. Imagine distant voices, familiar laughter, the rustle of robes, the gentle thud of training sticks. Nothing urgent, just echoes. You wander the valley path one last time. Your feet know the steps. The scent of rain still lingers on moss stones with every step. The world grows softer. Lighter. You pass the little river, where koi glide beneath blossoms. You pause at the hill, where students once bowed, their shadows long in golden dusk. The breeze brushes past you again, this time, softer than breath. It lifts the edge of your sleeve like a farewell. And as your eyes grow heavier, let that wind carry you. Let the weight fall from your shoulders. The sword is gone, but its shape remains in memory. A story, a whisper, a rhythm in the dark. Good night, traveler of another time. Sleep well, brave one.